Good morning and welcome to the latest Logistics Manager Property webinar, From Just in Time to Just in Case, the story of logistics in a pandemic year and how people and property made it happen, kindly sponsored by property investment and development company SEGRO. I am really excited to introduce our panelists today. I do hope that's going to move through. Will Butler-Adams, MD of Brompton Bikes. Engineer by training, Will joined the company in 2002 and took over as MD in 2008. And in this time has grown the company from a 2 million turnover with 27 staff to a 55 million turnover with more than 500 staff. He was awarded an OBE by the Queen in 2015 for services to industry. With a strong interest in education, Will is a fellow of the City and Guilds Institute, a visiting lecturer at Imperial College, was chair of the Vibrant Economy Commission, as well as being founding trustee of Inspiring the Future charity. He is on the board of Investors in People, a fellow of Institute of Mechanical Engineers, a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society, member of the Vintners Company, but likes to spend much of his spare time on his veggie patch. Our second panelist is Philip Rowe, a Chief Customer Officer of DHL Supply Chain with responsibility for leading the sales, marketing and customer experience agenda for the UKI. Phil has substantial experience of supply chain leadership across multiple customers, sectors and geographies, with 30 years experience in a variety of senior leadership and operational roles. Mark Wilkes is Director of Infrastructure and Sustainability at DPD. He joined the company, then known as Parcel Line, in 1988, so has been their man and boy as engineering supervisor before progressing through to the management ranks and achieving the role of Director of Technical Services in 2008. As board director, Mark's remit has expanded to include property, engineering, health and safety, and latterly CSR. Mark is responsible for delivering the hub and network infrastructure required to maintain DPD's rapid continued growth. In addition, he has played a key role in the integration of electric vehicles and micro-distribution depots in the DPD network, delivering an award-winning, industry-leading sustainable proposition. And last, but by no means least, Alan Holland, Managing Director of SEGRO's London business. Alan looks after the company's property portfolio, which focuses on the capital, with a market value of over £4.5 billion. The portfolio spans more than 60 London locations, with more than 450 customers from sectors as diverse as aviation, retail and logistics. Alan is a chartered surveyor with over 20 years real estate experience in the industrial and logistics market. My name is Liza Helps. I'm the property editor of Logistics Manager magazine, and I have been writing for property for far too long. I'll be your host today. We are hoping and have allowed for an hour for the webinar, and we'll be taking questions throughout the event. So please feel free to post them in the chat box on your screen, and I will pose them to the panelists throughout. We will do our best to get through as many questions as possible. So, to set the scene, the pandemic has stress tested the supply chains to the nth degree, highlighting vulnerabilities and exposing weaknesses, in particular, the reliance on just-in-time JIT logistics solutions. When up and running, JIT, where operations receive inventory only as it's needed for production, is efficient and cost-effective, but can fail or falter when faced with disruptions. And there have been plenty of those in the last 12 months. What is extraordinary is that apart from a few hiccups right at the beginning of lockdown, there are a few instances where it has failed to the level where there are empty shelves for weeks on end and multiple catastrophic business and manufacturing failures. This has been down to the ability of the logistics sector to build resilience into the supply chain and move from a just-in-time to a just-in-case model or some type of hybrid. But how was it done? What challenges were faced and how were these overcome? How quickly can you go from just in time to just in case in the middle of a pandemic? We hope to shed some light on that today and highlight factors that are critical to facilitating it, people and property. Now, it has been literally a year since I feel this all started. So guys, this time a year ago, what were you thinking? Phil?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk together today. yeah, a year ago. Feels like a decade ago, not a year, I must say. I guess we were kind of expectant and wondering what would happen. We had a little bit of an insight from the other regions of DHL. So in particular in Asia Pacific and in other parts of Europe, we'd already seen much greater impact than we were seeing in the UK in early March. But what was really unknown is to us was how much is this going to really affect our people? So how much are we going to see of this disease? What's going to happen at local level to our across our 44,000 people? That was the first unknown. So our real focus was on health and safety methods. What should we put in place to try and minimise the spread? That was the first thing that was in our heads. And the other really big unknown was, what would the government do? We'd been through a period from late January, early February onwards of, if you remember, the herd immunity narrative. And so we didn't know if they were going to do anything or something or a lot. And obviously that really developed very quickly over time when we got to the last week in March, and the government decided to act in a much more incisive way. So our first thought was about our people. By this time we'd closed all our offices down already, so we didn't wait for the instruction, if you like. We were taking the measures ourselves to try and protect our people. But it wasn't really until we saw the extent of the lockdown and the measures that we could really start to go into the level of detail that was needed for the different supply chains that we service.
What about for you, Will? I mean, again, very, very different sort of thing. Again, was this sort of lockdown, but sort of in a business sort of case, where did that leave you?
Well, we sell all over the world. So we have an office in Shanghai. So our team in Shanghai were giving us a bit more of a feel for how aggressive the virus was. So sort of in February, everybody who was vulnerable, we sort of asked them to stay at home. And obviously that affected our ability to make bikes to a degree, but we still had people coming into the office, but anyone who was vulnerable or in that category we sent home. Then we came to lockdown, and sort of all hell broke loose pretty quick because all of our shops around Europe closed. And but we took a decision fairly early on, and I think the problem with things when they go wrong is it's all too easy. You just go to the furthest end of the fulcrum of the seesaw, and actually having got rid of all of our vulnerable staff, and we'd been watching the virus pretty closely, it was pretty clear that the risks were to the vulnerable and to the elderly. They weren't, by all accounts, even back then, the evidence was that the risks to healthy younger people was relatively low. But to a lot of my staff who've been with me a long time and are working class manufacturers, if they lost their job going into a recession post-pandemic, that would have a far bigger impact on their life than the risks of the virus itself. So it wasn't straightforward to go, well, we're just going to close down. And Philip must have been in the same boat, because, we didn't stop. We haven't stopped a single day. You have to take more nuanced decisions. It's not black and white. And I think too many people at that time just rushed to oh God, it's a disaster, we all have to close down. Hold on a minute. The world lives, breathes, eats. We have to balance it, and we have to, as leaders, take a decision that isn't black or white, and it's nuanced. And I was in for the first lockdown every single day, and every single day I made a little video on my own in the office, perched my little phone on a couple of books to tell the staff what was going on every day. Because that first lockdown, our staff were being stopped by the police. There was huge amounts of fear. and they needed reassurance. And I was very honest. And I said, look, guys, the thing we've got to get out of this is not have anyone lose their job. We've protected the people that are vulnerable, but for the rest of us, we've got to hold on to this business because that could be a big risk. And actually, everyone respected that. And then we had endless problems with, not having enough sanitizers and rejigging the entire flipping factory and all the other complete dramas that came along. But initially, it was about not following the crowd actually, and stopping and thinking for ourselves and believing what was right for our business.
I mean, for you guys, so you're talking sort of Will and Phil, you're dealing with the sort of what I call one end of that sort of supply chain sort of side. But for Mark, I mean, coming into it for you guys, a different type of set of problems sort of reared its head?
I think listening to Will and both Phil, I think we had a very similar approach in the early days as well. Mm-hmm. We shielded all our vulnerable people 70 years and over, and we got quite a few people those in the front line who moved parcels, so they was sent home and looked after and protected straight away. And then we had come to the end of March, and exactly the same. We protected everybody we could. We have 1,500 people working in offices that went to work from home. I think that was our biggest challenge because we don't have home workers. So people who work in offices, IT people, customer services, etc., was how you could set them up quickly to continue doing their daily jobs in their home environment. So, our IT department had to find laptops, and I think the supply chain of laptops, everybody else was doing the same thing. So we all went through the same issues. You're trying to get laptops, mobile phones, all the tech to make it work at home. But eventually we got there, and by mid-April, everything was back and working in a happy environment. Frontline workers who deliver parcels had to go to work every day. So they was in depots and hubs sorting parcels and making sure the deliveries to the final mile customer just continued as normal without little disruption.
It certainly seemed that from that very, very beginning piece, we saw everyone sort of stop, everyone not really quite sure what was going on. But that then sort of moved. I mean, I certainly sort of found out that, I thought, oh, well, as they say, the sky's going to fall on my head sort of thing. But actually, it was far from the case. It seemed as though the issues that arose were very, very quickly overcome. Where do you see that sort of drive to come from? Or was it just a case of you had to, there was no other choice?
I think there's probably two factors really in that. The first is that even if you go back a year ago, so you go back pre the sort of lockdown period, what we'd seen is really significant changes in consumer buying patterns. So, I mean, we work across pretty much all sectors of the economy, from food retailing to car manufacturing to airport to aviation and travel and to pubs. And so the impact in those different areas, even as I say, before the lockdown, was massive. I mean, we were busier in the first week of March in our food businesses, whether it's manufacturing or retailing, than we had been at Christmas. And in fact, as we went through the year, it just stayed busy. I mean, we had like 39 Christmas weeks last year. It was quite startling, really. But by the same token, we also had some areas of business that completely died away, particularly as the lockdown came into being. So I think the two factors that I would say about how we respond to it: first, you have a response within the individual supply chain that we're managing, and all of our supply chain operations have business continuity plans, but we've never had a situation ever where we'd had to put all 400 of them in place at the same time. Yeah, which is a slightly different challenge, really. But the second thing is that what we put in place very quickly was an organizational level response. So it wasn't down to the individual location to take all the responses for that. We were actively redeploying resources across multiple contracts to try and deal with people who had sites and customers that had huge levels of activity or huge issues, and also redeploy people that were close by or potentially might have been furloughed. So those two things combined local response and then an organizational level response across the top of it were broadly how we tried to deal with the enormous uncertainties that we had, certainly going into April and May.
For Alan, when you sort of doing that, obviously your sort of customers and clients, what did you see as coming into this, into the pandemic, and that was that sort of reflected in what you saw in your business?
Yeah. So morning, everybody. I think we saw what the panel had described in terms of, most customers and businesses had a first and foremost concern for employees, colleagues, and clearly that was shared amongst the SEGRO organisation. But what we saw was a situation where the role that our customers play in society is absolutely crucial. So whether you're delivering parcels, advanced engineering, or general supply chain, I think everyone in the sector has realised this for some time now, but the industrial and logistic need, it keeps cities moving. It keeps our societies and our economies moving. So sort of stopping during lockdown wasn't an option. So across the whole array of our customers, there was some sort of disruption to their businesses, kind of the high street being closed, restaurants being closed. But actually it was pretty evident that the show had to go on. And I think the businesses showed an immense resilience and adaptability. And as we come out of the pandemic and lockdown, hopefully, I think as Phil said, it's actually accelerated a lot of the trends that were already present. Digitization, our world, our lives, our kids working at home, everyone's embracing digital. That was there, but it's just been kind of put on steroids. And the changing consumer behavior that Phil mentioned, the advent of online and the adoption of online from those who didn't use it. And I'm sure Mark can vouch for the sort of demand we've seen in post and parcels. So actually, it's really accelerated, and I think it's a great, it's sort of businesses are responding to that. That's what we're seeing. They're pivoting, they're responding, and they're doing their very best to do that in a real kind of sustainable way.
But I would add to that. There is this slight myth that it's all some organized, super professional, thing. All hell broke loose. It was hairy-arsed, flying around, panic, and obviously we're trying to protect our staff and our customers, but, and it wasn't quick. I mean, we've been trying to catch up from the moment it started, and we're still catching up. And I think in business, and for anyone that's listening, we need to slightly shake this idea that, we're a sort of, on our contingency plan kicked in and it was all perfect and we're a super professional organization, it all went tickety-boo, because that's not reality, particularly when you're thrown something like this. You have to think on your feet. You have to be prepared to take calculated risk. You have to be very, very strong at communicating to your staff, because people are fearful. There is uncertainty. It's not part of the plan, but you shouldn't be afraid to keep the show on the road. And I think that's the message that we learned, because one of our problems was, after about 6 weeks, most of our suppliers had closed down. So we were like, what are you doing closing down, you muppet? No one told you to close down. Why on earth have you closed down? Now you're going to take us out. So we were hiring vans and trotting up to our suppliers and just hoofing out stuff, picking up some of their machinery so we could finish it off at our factory, just to keep us going. You have to innovate. You have to remain professional as best you can, but it isn't professional, is my point. It is difficult and uncomfortable and not perfect.
I mean, Mark, you must have seen that.
Yeah, I think to support that, I think we talk about it, we went to total lockdown. I think the first 2 weeks of that total lockdown, we saw the volumes fall away. And Alan just alluded to it, you know, through 2018 and 2019, our growth was probably about 4% year on year. And you know, from end of 2018, it fell away, and nobody really knows why. It's like somebody turned, and Dwayne's probably, our CEO's got the best analysis for that, is from a gas mark 10 down to about a gas mark 6. Yeah, 2 weeks after it's into total lockdown, the complete opposite happened. In peak one, we went to 45% growth, and then by the time we got to peak two, which is, we all know, is the Cyber and the Black Friday weekend, was at 65% growth across the total business. So you can see how you manage that, you know. And going on, listen, what Will says, we had to have a senior management meeting every day at 9 o'clock because she was making daily decisions to cope with the demand. People
exactly the same. We introduced a daily meeting because it was so bloody you didn't know what the hell was going on. You had to just wing it and make decisions literally daily.
Yeah, we were exactly the same. Well, exactly the same. We had a situation steering team met every morning. We had, because we've got quite a big business in different divisions. The divisions met at 9. The UKR one met at 10. And you know, a lot of the uncertainties were about, well, what's a critical industry ?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
no one told us.
Talking to government as well, saying, come on, you know, get your definitions clear. But the main thing we were guided by was, how do you keep going but keep the people with you at the same time? Because if you've got fear in the people that say, well, there's this unknown whatever it is out there, and there was, you know, nobody really knew how virulent it was or how it was spread. So, you know, I remember was putting in place loads of different solutions. You know, on your property point, Alan, we turned sites that were normally doing clothing into looking after food retail. You know, we turned sites that normally look after pubs to provisioning prisons. And you know, you'll never find that written on a plan anywhere, you know, but you're guided by doing the right thing to keep people provisioned and to keep your people safe. Yeah, but after that, you're down to your own ingenuity about how you can best continue to deal with those massive spikes of volume, Mark, that you're talking about, and then how you help people when, you know, you've got factories closing down and people being put on furlough.
With these things, I've just got a question in from Jed Parry, a question to Will. What will they permanently change in supply chain and sales, online versus retail, as a result of the last 12 months, if anything?
Well, I mean, the thing is, in adversity, there is opportunity. So, you know, we have had a plan to introduce direct to consumer for some time. I mean, it's hilarious really, because we have the perfect direct to consumer bike, because you can fold it up and it's quite small, but we don't do direct to consumer. That's because we grew on a strong relationship with our dealers around the world, and we see service as being a really important part of the proposition. But when every single shop round in Europe is closed and the consumers want bikes because they don't want to travel on public transport, and they can't get a bike because they don't want to go to a shop, you're like, well, sod this, we've got to find a way around it. And we had this amazing strategic plan, and we were going to use all these fancy people, and then we thought that we just Shopify, lob it on there, budget, it'll work, the customer can get it, just get the flipping bike to the customer. One, because our orders have fallen off a cliff, and two, because the customers were desperate for bikes. So, you know, and that we sort of muddled along with that for about 3 months. We've now caught up with all the other stuff, and in that regard, for our business, it's been really good because it shakes everybody up, and it reminds them that you don't have to go through some 4-month consultancy and then get some research bods in to cover everyone's arse. You can just have a crack at it, do it quite quickly, do it quite small, find out, and get on with it. And that's been very good for our business. I mean, we were saved a bit like Mark. You know, we yanked on the anchors. We were worried about our cash. Things were looking really dire. And then within about 3 months, sales went off a chart, and we just couldn't make enough bikes. Still can't. And but then we couldn't get the bits. But luckily, and it's one of the few compliments I'll give to dear old Brexit, but we had put £1.5 million into stock in preparation for Brexit. So we munched through that to get us out of the mire of COVID. So, you know, the best thing that COVID has done for our businesses in a positive way, notwithstanding all the other tragedies that we've had to face, has been giving my team the confidence to make decisions and realize they won't be, done in for using their initiative and taking calculated risk.
And that I think that sort of brings it round when you're having to make those decisions incredibly fast. I mean, Phil, you were saying you were changing fashions into doing prisons, and you were doing food and everything as well. As you said, those things couldn't be sort of written down and sort of double checked over. Is that something, that speed of movement, is that something you're going to sort of adopt through sort of a managerial sort of basis?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely, yes. And I'd echo some of Will's points there. I think one of the best things that we did really quickly, we put that structure in for the SST, and we put a structure in which allowed us to understand in each one of our 400 sites how busy we were, what resources we've got, what resources were available on a daily basis. And against that, we had a team of people that redeployed resources. And on that basis, we put in new e-commerce solutions for customers over weekends, because they needed sorry, that's my doubling background, because so that's another feature of lockdown, isn't it? Because actually they needed the route to market, because, and I think to answer your question directly, I think the last time I looked at the numbers, the percentage of retail sales online grew to 37% last year from 22% the year before.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going back. I honestly don't, because I think people have also got used to buying things directly to the home that they never thought they would in the past. I remember one of our conversations that we had early on when we were past the first phase was, how do we get the resources we need to deliver all the hot tubs that have been ordered? And because there's an explosion. I mean, the furlough scheme was I remember that the day that came out, and what a relief it was to everybody. But actually, what it's meant is also there's a lot of cash. I mean, there's more money been saved in the last year than from.
I wonder what our staff would. I wonder what our staff were doing. I now discovered they're sitting in a hot tub doing their Zoom call. It's all coming clear now.
Yeah, fixing their bike. So yeah, it is. There was some brilliant ingenuity.
Brilliant. I mean, for Mark, I mean, you obviously, your business right at that sort of that end. I mean, one of the things that sort of springs to mind is that with so much, growth, you talked about sort of 45%, sort of 65% sort of growth sort of there. How did you actually sort of fulfill that? Because you're going to need a lot of people, a lot of vans. Did you have them all?
Because our plan was 4% growth, so clearly we didn't have all that. So you think we worked through the year. By the time we come to June, we realised that peak 2 which is the Cyber Weekend, was coming quickly. So we started planning probably for June, the end of May, to see what we're going to do. So between May and the end of the year, we took on another 9,000 people. So we took on another 9,000 people. We planned to we planned to open 6 additional sites last year. We had to open another additional 10 on top of that. So our original plan was for about 200,000 square feet. We ended up going for 440,000 square feet of property. So, and then we had to buy vehicles on top of that. But the supply chain, it all come through and it all worked out. But again, going back to the original thing, without the daily meeting and that fluidity that you have and flexibility, you couldn't do it. Speedy response is what you need in every decision. You couldn't wait a week to talk to somebody. It had to be the next day. I've got a property. It's come to market. Can we make this one work? Yes, we can. Get the lease signed. Let's move quickly. And you needed that speedy response. Otherwise, you wouldn't have achieved what you're going to do. It's pre-COVID, our split was 50-50. Going back to this online, 50-50 was business to business, 50% was business to consumer. Post-COVID, we're now at 75 business to consumer and 25% B2B. So you can see the way the marketplace has changed.
I mean, with that, you talk about the speed with which you had to use sort of, you know, property. I mean, I certainly know sort of selling houses and everything, it can take forever. I mean, so Alan, on this one, how much did that sort of come down onto you guys to get things moving, to facilitate people sort of like Mark and Phil to actually fulfill?
Yeah, I think it's about embracing agility. I think we're all given the opportunity to think differently, be a bit creative. You know, I think the industry has tried to be as flexible as it can to respond to customers' needs, but you know, the needs kind of went off the scale, and they were changing so fast. So I think it's about being agile and supporting almost what you don't know in terms of what the customer might need next week, next month. And again, there's ways of doing that by just sticking close to your customers and having that dialogue and that interaction all the time, and you know, trying to do things with a degree of innovation to get things done, you know, better, smarter, both for the in the now moment, but also the longer term.
Yeah, there's this, I mean, looking sort of at that, when you were sort of doing properties, I mean, were there any sort of times when literally you had a property and it went? Did you have that sort of movement going through?
It was a mix. So we had certain sectors who were clearly having a harder time than others. So you're almost helping folk, you know, sort of thrive in adversity, but also, you know, right sizing their business to support the situation they're in. So if you like, winners and losers, but it's about sort of providing a range of options, such that these vibrant estates and business communities that we run can actually, you know, prosper and start to look ahead, because a lot of these sort of changes and events, you know, have a degree of permanence to them. So whilst we've been sort of being very agile and flexible, customers have a real sort of eye on the future and what the future might look like post-pandemic. Well,
that's quite, because I've got another question here, and here it goes. It goes. We hear a lot about localization and future cities for offices and retail. What does that mean for the world of logistics? I think, Mark, you might be quite a good one on this one.
I mean, for us, you know, major cities, we deliver final mile, and we said our B2B markets fell apart. It not fell apart. The volume is drastically reduced. We're now just trying to come back to the levels that we saw before this time last year. So that number is starting to come back up now, because businesses are still using their stores for different reasons. They're using them as distribution warehouses, fashion, retail. Literally, you pick from the store to deliver to the customer now. So the business model has changed, and I think Alan's right. Businesses will have to think different how they operate. When you come to urbanisation and everything else, we're looking now to green deliveries, and we're looking at bringing electric vehicles in, because that's the next big thing. You know, you don't want big vehicles going through cities, because if cities change and offices become vacant and get converted to residential, which you can, you know, a lot of people are looking at the moment, I think it will definitely change the landscape for us, the way we deliver into city centres.
What does that sort of mean for you, Phil?
Well, I think the first thing really is that as a business, you've got to have multiple routes to your customers. You really have. If you haven't got an omni-channel offering, it doesn't matter whether you're a retailer or a manufacturer, in my view, or a distributor. You've got to have multiple routes to your customers, and depending on the product, some of that is going to be very, very local. And you've seen lots of growth of small local businesses doing deliveries of things that you wouldn't expect. I bought my daughter's birthday cake online last week, something I never contemplated in all my life, but there you go. And I think therefore you've got to have the right means. And I think, you know, I know Mark and ourselves and a lot of other big companies doing the same thing, really, which is pushing for better infrastructure for electrification and working closely with vehicle suppliers to make sure that we can electrify as soon as possible, and use therefore better means of delivery. I think the big unknown really is how much of office working and city working is going to come back. We did a lot of work with our people to say, do you want to go back to office working, the balance we had before, or what's your preference? And only 4% of the people that we talked to wanted to go back to full-time working in offices.
Yeah, I mean, we now have 600 staff, and about 330 of those are what you define as office, and about 250 are directly involved in making bikes. But I mean, before this all started, for over 10 years, we had something called a 9-day fortnight, which we still have, which is you work 80 hours in 9 days, not in 10. So every other weekend's a long weekend, which has always been pretty popular. But we are definitely not going to go back to people coming in 5 days a week. I mean, it's just totally unnecessary. But we will be very firm about our staff coming into the office, because that is really, really important to our business. We're an unusual business because we're so vertically integrated. We take a raw tube, like a raw tube of steel, and then we have shops in Covent Garden, Shanghai, Beijing, we go the whole Monty. So we've got very diverse elements going on in our business. It's really important that people from different departments meet other parts of the business and understand what's going on. And, it has to happen through serendipity. You can't sort of force that. In a department, yes, you have your meetings and your updates, but you need to have someone going and bumping into somebody when they're going to get a cup of coffee, or, when they're wandering off to go into a meeting and they catch up with somebody else. That's terribly important. So we don't think it's healthy. We certainly don't think it's good for the business to have, where we have been, people working from home full on. So I cannot see a scenario where you don't have communities in work coming back together. It's just that where you might have needed, 400 desks for 400 people, you now need 200 desks for 400 people, which is going to affect office requirements, but they're not going to disappear.
I think we're exactly the same. We'll probably do a 3 and a 2 day week split between our workforce. Again, like Phil, we did a poll, and that was their preference. Kind of coming 3 days, 2 days at home. And like Will said, I think it's all about culture. You need to keep the culture of your business. Will's built his business on the culture you just said, and it's specialised, and we're the same. And when you get communities come back in, ideas start to bounce off people again. You get that personal interaction. I think it's very, very critical to the future growth of the business. You need to get this personal interaction going again.
And funnily enough, I think the third lockdown has really brought that point home for a lot of people. Yeah. I think the first lockdown going into summer, there was an element of novelty, and we're all in it together.
It's the hot tub. It's the hot tub, Phil. We all know it's the hot tub. You see, it's wearing off.
I have to get out of the garage then. No, well. Yeah.
So I've got another couple of questions from Graham Gittins. As the pandemic is resolved, will there be elements of the business that will change either growth or make changes long term or reduce them? I think do you think we've covered that one?
In part, I think. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see, if the vaccination program continues to go as well as it has, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see quite a significant consumer demand in the second half of this year.
There's one thing I might add, I don't know whether I'm really answering that question or not, but we have some weird policies at our business. So for example, we have a policy where we pay our suppliers within 30 days. So when we recruit people into our finance team, they go bouncing about and they say, oh, look, we can extend it to 60 days. We said, no, we don't do 60 days. We pay within 30 days. And we are sort of old school in the relationships that we have with our supply chain, in how we have very long relationships with them. We pay them on time. They're very much integrated into our business. And obviously we're talking about just in time versus just in case, but we've had a situation in our sector where the demand is so big globally that the supply chain can't keep up. You've got the likes of Giant, Cannondale, Specialized. They're just wandering in and sort of hoofing out all the stuff that they want. We've done, considering our size of business, we've done pretty well to retain our supply chain. And a lot of that is because we didn't treat our customers, our suppliers, like shit. And I think there's some good, hopefully there'll be some good things that come out of this in terms of how you have to work as a team when everything's going well, and when everything's, you can start swashing about and screwing people so hard that it makes you feel good and you don't care about them. But when things are difficult, that's when you discover the power and the importance of relationships, and the fact that you need to retain good relationships with your staff, with your supply chain, to deal with uncertainty, because that's when that's the difference between success and failure, those relationships. And I think that's brought that back into focus.
Anyone else wanted to on that one? You're okay? We have another one. To fulfill the omni distribution, do you feel this to be an expansion of owned dedicated warehousing, or a combination of owned 3PL and therefore expanding the 3PL market? Phil?
All of the above, I think, is where I mean, I know that the warehousing stock in the UK is at a pretty low level at the minute. I know that, I mean, partly through Brexit, dress rehearsals and actual Brexit and COVID, we were certainly very, very full back into last year, and continue to be very, very full now. I think the demand for warehousing is going to stay high. I think Brexit will force that anyway as we go forward. But there will be, whilst there's a lot of big boxes being built, there's still going to be a substantial demand for shared use warehousing as we go forward, particularly I think in e-commerce.
Alan, what do you on that score?
I think just to build to that, as well as requirement and demand for space in itself, a clear common denominator is the aspiration for a first-class supply chain. So a mix, as Phil said, but businesses need diversity in their supply chain, and first class in all its forms. So definitely a modernity, really, really good quality space, but also space that looks after the people inside. Wellness is an increasingly important matter. Looking after your staff, making sure not just their health and safety in terms of day-to-day health and safety, but having somewhere to exercise, having a common canteen or whatever it might be. So first-class supply chains in all its forms, and increasingly, I think we've all learned that we've got a responsibility to support low carbon growth.
Yeah.
And I think our logistics and industrial customers are definitely hugely supportive in this regard, and we've all got a big part to play in a kind of societal sense.
I think that brings in another question that I've got, saying, has the pandemic given you time as a business to reflect on your approach to sustainability and zero carbon targets? Mark?
Yeah, as I alluded to earlier, we see it as the next big key part of our growth and where we're going to go to. So green deliveries is what we're into at the moment. We've got 5 urban sites across the UK, which is all totally electric. We have just over 730 EV vehicles on fleet at the moment. We've just placed another order for another 700. But I think it goes back to Phil's point, it's the manufacturer. The cost of an electric vehicle is excessive compared to a normal diesel vehicle. The infrastructure for charging is another problem that we're all going to come up against, because the more vehicles we bring in, the pressure on the network, the grid, is going to be horrendous, but we're probably delivering 1 million parcels a week on electric at the moment. And last year, I think we did over 11 million parcels in the last 6 months of the year on electric. So that's where we're going. We're doing lots of other things. We've got Vision 2025, which is going to come in, where we're going to have 25 cities by 2025 to 25% of the population delivered all on electric as well. So we've got some fantastic things happening. We're going to deliver 10 cities this year. It's our challenge to do. And on the back of that, we've got something called Project Breathe as well, where we're starting to monitor the carbon emissions at the delivery point. So if you get electric delivery, you'll be able to log on to the DPD app, and it'll tell you the carbon at that point of delivery in the particles in the air. So yeah, we're doing lots of things in that space, and we see it as a key part of our growth.
It's interesting, isn't it, that if you look at the sustainability program that we've been running since 2010. We've made massive moves forward in property and warehousing, and actually a lot of that has been done together with property businesses. Some of that has been done by using the same technology that's worked for us in some regions of the world in others. Yeah, the big challenge is we're twice as far down the path in property than we are in transportation. And so the stuff that we can directly control, we've made a lot of progress on. The stuff that we really do need the infrastructure behind, and also the innovation in vehicles. I mean, we put the first 17 tonner on the road with Volvo in the autumn last year, because most of our customers need slightly larger vehicles, Mark, than yours do. Yeah, particularly in the last mile. So getting electrification up the vehicle range and then getting adoption and the infrastructure is the key to it. But there's a great opportunity, I think, in the property market, because the infrastructure that's needed to make that work has got to be built. Yeah, it doesn't really exist at the moment, particularly on electrification. So yeah, it's a good opportunity for us to collaborate on that as we move forward.
You won't be surprised to hear that I think that what Mark and Philip are doing is pretty good, but they are, of course, slightly barking up the wrong tree, certainly for the last mile, because people buy Teslas and think they're doing their bit for society, but the carbon footprint on the construction of Tesla is a complete joke, and you're carrying mostly a whole load of batteries to get your little 90-kilo jelly tot around. You know, inside cities, you need cargo bikes, cargo movers. You know, our bike that carries the same person that a Tesla does weighs 12 kilos. A Tesla weighs nearly 2 tons. I mean, that's completely and utterly ridiculous. So the innovation in how we move things about, it exists, but you need light vehicles when you're inside a city. And you know, obviously, if you're carrying concrete slabs for the construction industry, it's slightly different. But for the vast majority of what our consumers, particularly B2C, are buying, and that area has huge growth. It's not our sector because we're folding bikes, we're not cargo bikes, but the cargo bike area is immense in terms of opportunity. But the other one is, how do your people get to work? You know, we have got 600 staff. We have about 190 of our staff coming to work on bikes, of which at the moment about 60% are e-bikes. The average distance in Germany, which is, you know, they've got in terms of e-bikes, that they're selling over 1 million e-bikes a year. The average distance that a punter rides on an e-bike is 7.5 miles. The average distance to work, in journey. So that's not a last mile solution. So there's so much we can do, and the technology exists, the product exists. It's just like what we've been through in the last 12 months. You just need to change your mindset and get out there and get started and try and learn and then develop and grow.
Alan, with sort of looking at that sort of infrastructure piece and sort of the electrification, sort of supporting, it might even be sort of e-bikes, it will certainly be electric vans and everything. Where do you see sort of property playing that part? I mean, we've talked about sort of wellness, but do we see property as part of the solution, maybe looking at renewables?
So yeah, I think the sector is trying to play its part and provide product that can support this drive towards low carbon, whether that's EV charging points, both for consumers, both for cars and vehicles, commercial vehicles, the latter being a little bit harder, but making our buildings as lean and efficient and supporting that drive for renewables is key. We've done a couple of schemes now which are net zero projects, and we're seeing the demand for those really strong. Businesses are calling for this type of product. So we have to look at the whole supply chain, we have to look at the transport beyond it, but at the building level, there's quite a bit that the property sector can and is doing. Last week, we relaunched our Responsible SEGRO initiative, which is something that we've had for a while, but just putting it out there to really seize the opportunity to champion and support low carbon growth, because we're seeing it from our customer base, from the panel today, and in all markets across continental Europe.
Well,
Sorry, everybody. I'm gonna have to dive out now. I've got to go. So thank you for this.
A pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Thoroughly enjoyed having you here. Great talking to you. Take care.
Cheers, Mark. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Guys, we have just got another question that's sort of come in. I'm not quite sort of sure where it sort of plays in, but I think it's going to start affecting us all probably more than we would like. And that is, and it's from somebody else who goes, clients are starting to scream about paperwork post-Brexit and the issues on import and export, containers from Asia, prohibitive rates, supply chain delays and components. Are we facing some major chaos in retail and manufacturer, or is it just the press overhyping the situation?
Good, nice small question.
Nice small question. Oh, Brexit.
I think there's two. I think just trying to cut that question apart a bit. I think there's two broad issues that are described. And the first is around international transportation. So the point about containers, and it applies to air freight as well. And the second point, I think, is about Brexit. On the first point, I think we are going through a period now where we're having to both reopen and readjust international movements. There's a lot of containers that are in the wrong place. There's a lot of empties in the wrong place. There's a lot of ports. There's a lot of warehouses that are full of stock, and there's a lot of ports that are full of product that can't go into warehouses. And I think that's going to take a while to play out before we get back to the kind of efficiency and equilibrium that we enjoyed beforehand. But it will play out, and in certain routes it already has. On Brexit, the issues are largely from what we see around the requirement for traders in terms of documentation to support physical goods movements. A lot of that is still being learned. I think we are no more than 40% through understanding the implications of Brexit on movements of goods. I mean, there's no checks, for example, on imports from the EU into the UK, and that's been put back now until the end of the year. The rules of origin understanding is spreading throughout the business, and we still really don't know how the Northern Ireland situation is going to bottom itself out. So I probably wouldn't agree with the last piece of the question about there being an unholy chaos, but I do think that the disruption that we've seen from what we've enjoyed for many, many years is going to continue for some while yet.
Does that sort of play into that sort of, we did have a sort of a just-in-time thing. It was a slick, smooth machine that was working, or certainly on the outside when we sort of saw it. Do we see this moving where we're going to have to see more stock in the UK going more sort of just enough, or are we going to sort of a bit of a hybrid is going to develop?
I think it will be a hybrid. I don't think. I think there is a real danger, not about overhyping, but oversimplifying complex supply chains that have been improved and tailored over time. Yeah, and I think there will be a return to what was normality, but I don't think the issues, particularly around Brexit, are yet fully played out.
I would agree with that. And I mean, the consequences of both COVID and Brexit are absolutely real. And there's no question. Delays, costs, logistics, all of that, paperwork, real. But they will sort themselves out. But it's going to be, next spring before it's beginning to sort of get sensible. And in the meantime, people are going to hold more stock because they're fearful. So, they're not going to suddenly give it up. It'll take a while before they build that confidence again and start lowering their stock. But there's a big driver to do that because it's cash. You don't want to have your stock tied up in cash. But that investment at the moment is worth investing in because it's protecting your ability to make product. So you will invest in it. But ordinarily, you'd rather have the cash invested in something else, more added value.
Guys, we sort of come round to sort of, is there sort of anything that you would sort of want to add? I mean, having looked over this last year and seen it, what do you feel is the biggest thing you can take away from that year? I mean, good, preferably, but, going forward. Phil?
I think for me is, the good side of this is about what can be done, the ingenuity, speed, and application of focused teams. I think that, in 10 years' time, that's the thing I'm going to remember more than anything else. And maintaining that same approach and attitude as we come out of COVID, as we support businesses who are coming out of COVID and the unraveling of Brexit, is going to be really important for the UK economy.
Well, what about you?
Yeah, I think notwithstanding the gravity and the seriousness of what we've all been through, I think it's a little bit of a dry run for the rather bigger problem we're facing, which is we do have a major climate problem facing our society, and we haven't got much time, and we're going to have to move quickly, and we're going to have to take risk, and we're going to have to so this has given us a bolt and a shock and taught us that we can't just trundle along and it'll be all right. It requires positive action. So I don't think this era of global change has ended now that we're coming out of COVID. I think it's the beginning of a decade or 20 years where society is going to have to realize this is not a UK issue or a US issue or a China issue. It's a global issue. We need to work together and be more radical and be more aggressive to deal with some of these big macro challenges we're facing.
Alan?
I mean, I'd agree with the sentiment that's been expressed. I guess just to sort of add another one in terms of what we've taken away, I think the logistics sector, the sort of commercial market has definitely appreciated the role we have in our communities.
Yeah.
I think the pandemic taught us to look out for people, whether it's our neighbours, our colleagues, or the communities in which we invest. It was a strange year for SEGRO. 2020 was our centenary year, with 100 years under our belt, and then the pandemic came along. But all those food banks that we were helping, and all those employment and training schemes that we have always supported, it really came to the fore. As Will said, not having a job or not being able to get into employment is a huge distress and cause of harm generally. So I think actually, I hope the industry and the sector, retains that focus on supporting the communities in which we exist. because I think as well as climate and as well as the business agility point, I think that that can be a real differential and change people's lives.
No, I think absolutely. Guys, it has been wonderful to talk to you all today. Thoroughly enjoyed learning about your businesses and everything that's gone on. Thank everybody for sending in their questions. And just to say that the recording will be up online to watch again, if you so wish, or to put your colleagues in touch with doing again. So Philip, Alan, Will, and Mark, who's already left, thank you again so very, very much. It has been great to host this webinar this morning.
Cheers, thanks everybody. Bye.
Thank you very much. Take care.
All the best.
Bye.